You are physically standing directly on a massive crowded dealership lot completely midly paralyzed by three totally identical looking compact sedans, and desperately trying to figure out exactly why one highly specific model costs significantly more money than the others parked right directly next to it. Automotive manufacturers are absolute brilliant masters of psychological pricing and trim-level packaging, purposefully and aggressively designing their glossy, heavy brochures to actively make you feel like you are heavily missing out on a massive lifestyle upgrade if you do not immediately financially stretch to purchase the fully loaded expensive premium version. Today, we are going to ruthlessly and logically dissect the equipment hierarchy of this highly specific chassis and figure out exactly which package is a genuine logical financial bargain and which one is just an overpriced empty marketing gimmick explicitly designed to forcefully extract maximum pure profit from your thin wallet. Let us heavily start directly with the absolute entry-level base model, which usually heavily appeals to massive commercial fleet buyers, highly budget-conscious consumers, and highly practical local driving schools. In its absolute most basic raw stripped-down form, you are getting standard manual dial air conditioning, highly durable woven cloth bucket seats, and traditional heavy steel wheels, completely covered with generic highly fragile plastic hubcaps usually measuring 14 or exactly 15 inches depending entirely on the highly specific market year and local strict regulations. However, even on this absolute barebones base trim level, the factory surprisingly generously includes power-operated windows on absolutely all four doors, highly convenient remote central locking, and a fundamentally decent, surprisingly loud-sounding four-speaker audio system that heavily includes basic auxiliary and universal serial bus inputs, actively allowing you to easily play your own digital music without ever needing highly complex, expensive adapters. The primary dashboard cluster is completely and wonderfully analog, featuring simple, highly clean physical dials for the speedometer and tachometer, heavily accompanied by a tiny monochrome liquid crystal display showing only the absolute most essential basic trip information, like total accumulated mileage, and a digital clock. But the absolute specific sweet spot, where the vast overwhelming majority of highly intelligent logical buyers usually settle, is the highly perfectly balanced mid-tier equipment level, often proudly designated loudly on the trunk lid as the mode or prime package, depending directly on your exact geographical region. This is exactly where the vehicle actually truly starts to physically feel like a truly modern, highly comfortable automobile rather than just a highly basic transportation metal appliance. You immediately step aggressively up to proper, highly lightweight aluminum alloy wheels, usually measuring 16 inches in total diameter, which drastically and heavily improves the exterior visual appeal, giving the entire car a much more heavily planted and premium physical stance on the hard road. Inside the main cabin, the absolute massive undeniable upgrade is the direct introduction of a gorgeous massive 7 or 8-inch full-color capacitive touchscreen infotainment system, heavily mounted high up right exactly in the center of the plastic dashboard. This highly specific digital screen completely heavily transforms the entire daily driving experience because it natively and flawlessly supports both the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto software ecosystems, meaning your highly powerful smartphone completely aggressively takes over the heavy complex navigation and media duties, instantly permanently saving you from ever dealing with horribly outdated clunky factory map interfaces that ruthlessly charge you a massive financial premium just for a basic software update. This mid-tier package also generously throws in a high-definition, highly wide-angle reverse camera, completely heavily equipped with active dynamic steering guidelines that brilliantly physically curve directly on the screen exactly as you physically turn the steering wheel, which is an absolute total literal lifesaver for easily executing highly stressful parallel parking maneuvers in extremely incredibly tight urban spaces without ever heavily scratching your painted rear bumper. You will also immediately heavily notice a significant physical upgrade in the highly tactile quality of the primary touch points, as the main steering wheel and the automatic gear selector are usually meticulously tightly wrapped in a highly smooth stitched synthetic leather material that feels infinitely vastly better in your bare hands than the hard, heavily textured urethane plastic typically found on the cheap base models. Now, if you heavily decide to aggressively throw all highly logical financial caution completely to the wind and purchase the absolute top highest tier specification, usually heavily called the elite or premium trim, you are actively stepping into a very weird psychological territory, where a highly humble budget compact car desperately tries heavily to masquerade as a highly expensive European luxury vehicle. On the physical exterior, you get highly aggressively styled projection optical headlights, heavily equipped with incredibly sharp continuous LED daytime running light signatures that make the entire front end look incredibly angry and aggressive directly in the rear view mirror of the car driving slowly ahead of you. The exterior plastic door handles receive a shiny bright chrome plating treatment, and the front plastic radiator grille gets a massive glossy shiny black finish heavily equipped with additional chrome horizontal slats, completely radically changing the entire frontal aesthetic. Moving directly to the interior, the highly standard woven fabric seats get entirely aggressively swapped out for a heavily perforated synthetic leather material that admittedly physically feels genuinely premium and highly soft to the touch, and the traditional physical manual climate control knobs are completely heavily replaced by a fully highly automatic digital climate control system that precisely automatically maintains your exact highly preferred cabin temperature down exactly to the half degree, actively utilizing highly sophisticated solar load light sensors heavily mounted directly on the dashboard. You also highly gain the massive daily convenience of proximity smart keyless entry, meaning you can simply physically walk up to the completely locked car and firmly press a tiny rubber button directly on the outer door handle to completely unlock it without ever physically taking the electronic key fob out of your pocket, heavily culminating in a glowing, highly futuristic push-button ignition switch mounted directly on the dashboard. Depending heavily on the highly specific market, you might even generously get a power-operated, highly tinted glass sunroof, heavily allowing fresh, cool air and natural bright light to completely aggressively flood the dark cabin during beautiful, highly sunny spring days. The primary audio system also receives a highly significant bump, actively adding dedicated high-frequency acoustic tweeters directly in the front door sail panels, and heavily sometimes a small, highly compact subwoofer drastically actively improving the vocal clarity and deep low and bass punch of your highly favorite music. But here exactly is the completely brutal, highly unfiltered mechanical truth from a pure hardcore physical engineering standpoint. Absolutely every single one of these wildly visually different trim levels rides physically on the exact completely same suspension geometry, actively utilizes the completely absolutely identical braking hardware, and actively shares the exact completely same highly rigid structural, high-strength steel unibody frame. The actual physical engine blocks, whether you highly choose the highly thermally efficient 1.4-liter naturally aspirated gasoline motor or the legendarily highly robust 1.6-liter turbo diesel power plant, are completely mathematically totally identical across absolutely every single package level, right from the absolutely cheapest stripped-down base model to the highly most expensive fully loaded premium trim. There is absolutely completely zero physical difference in actual straight-line acceleration, physical stopping distance, or highly lateral cornering capability, exactly between a cheap car with generic plastic hubcaps and a highly expensive one with top-spec massive alloy wheels. Therefore, my absolutely ultimate highly professional advice, as someone who has physically critically evaluated hundreds of these highly specific vehicles, is to hunt highly aggressively on the heavily populated secondary market, specifically strictly for that highly well-equipped mid-tier package. You actively get absolutely all the genuinely crucial highly modern technology like seamless, highly useful smartphone mirroring, integrated highly clear Bluetooth calling, and the highly incredibly necessary wide-angle reverse camera without completely heavily wasting your hard-earned cash on completely synthetic leather seats, that will absolutely violently burn the bare back of your legs heavily during the absolute peak intense heat of a boiling, highly sweltering summer afternoon, or highly complex digital climate control modules that are wildly heavily expensive to completely replace when they eventually heavily fail after a long decade of heavy physical use. You aggressively maximize your actual daily highly practical enjoyment while actively aggressively minimizing your total financial exposure, making it the absolute entirely smartest highly logical automotive decision you can possibly physically make in this highly specific extremely competitive market segment.